Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Back again for what seems to be just our daily update for the Ole Miss Rebels on the transfer portal recruiting trail, and they land another big fish here. Juice Wells, in my opinion, the number one wide receiver available in the transfer portal. And you take a look at what this Ole Miss offense might look like in 2024, just from a personnel standpoint, from the talent that they have on paper. And then I might remind you, they got one of the best offensive mind head coaches in the country in Lane Kiffin chefing up. This is going to be such a fun season for Ole Miss. I want to talk a little bit about what Juice Wells brings to the table, and then talk about this Ole Miss team being not just a contender for a college football playoff spot, but this is a contender to win the SEC title. I mean, this is one of the best teams on paper heading into the SEC in 2024. The boys are fired up. Before we get into it, just want to say thank you to you guys, and a special shout out to the Ole Miss fans. It does seem like every single day we're hopping on and giving some updates on Ole Miss in the transfer portal. You guys have shown a ton of support to the boys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Again, you guys have rocked with the boys in a big way. Can't thank you guys enough. Dale, I'm going to kick this one off to you. Juice Wells, heading to Ole Miss. How are we feeling?
I mean, this is the type of guy who should be able to run in tandem in the way I think everyone hopes Zachary Franklin would be able to run, but he's proven it now. I mean, Trey Harris was a revelation. He was way better than I thought he'd be, just looked so good. Huge to get him back, but now you really pair him up with another true number one who's proved it at the highest level, has dominated big games like against Clemson, like against Tennessee. I mean, this guy, he's so good.
Juice Wells, Trey Harris, two of the top receivers in the SEC, two bona fide wide receiver ones, now lining up on the same offense with Jackson Dart slinging the rock. Dill, just for fun, let's just take a look at what this Ole Miss offense, and Ole Miss fans, if I leave out any young cats, let me know in the comment section. Jackson Dart at quarterback, Quinshon Judkins at the running back position, two of the best players at their position group, not only in the SEC, but in the country. Trey Harris, Juice Wells, Jordan Watkins, ton of proven production there. You have Aiden Williams, who I think is going to be a stud year two for Ole Miss. And then you have Caden Prescorn, one of the top tight ends in the SEC. I mean, all with Lane Kiffin calling the plays here. This offense seems so difficult to stop. Now, Dale, I want to focus in a little bit more on Juice Wells, because a guy that, I mean, exploded onto the scene in 2022, obviously dealt with a lot of injuries in 2023. What does Juice Wells bring into this Ole Miss offense here?
Well, frankly, what I see him as is a little bit similar, frankly, to what Harris does, where every part of his game is very refined. I think the one thing he might have a little bit more is a little bit better after the catch ability. I mean, that's where he really shined, I thought, at South Carolina. So, again, very proven at all, doing everything. He can catch the ball deep. He runs good routes. He can run with the ball after the catch. Just there's not really a hole in his game where you're like, man, he doesn't really do that. He does it all.
Polished wide receiver, like true wide receiver one. And when you say the words true wide receiver one, it doesn't mean just really good at one thing. It's an all-around wide receiver that can do a lot of different things and kind of checks all the boxes. It's exactly what Juice Wells does. And you mentioned it first. My favorite attribute for Juice Wells is what he can do after the catch, right? 6'1", 210 pounds. He's built like a running back, such a smooth operator with the football in his hands. 928 receiving yards in 2022. Over 550 of those yards came after the catch. He forced 19 missed tackles. Those are running back numbers from a wide receiver. And then you look at just one of the more important metrics when you're evaluating wide receivers. When you're targeted with the football, is it successful? He was targeted 92 times, 69 catches on that. That's a 75% completion percentage when Juice Wells is targeted. When the ball's thrown to Juice Wells at South Carolina, I mean, good things happen.
And I don't even think we've gotten to really see his full skill set, because you think what South Carolina was dealing with. They just didn't have time to protect. So they had to go to a very gimmicky offense to an extent, where he was getting the balls in all sorts of different ways. Yes. A lot of swings, a lot of balls behind the line of scrimmage. But I think there is a lot more to his game in terms of running routes and catching the ball deep and doing some of those other things that, frankly, I think he's going to want to prove for the NFL draft, but also are those type of things that like pro-ready offenses in college football do. So that's how I'm looking forward for him, is just to like get a chance to play in an offense that has the ability to operate on schedule more and more of a normal offense rather than what South Carolina was doing.
Yeah, he certainly can do that 2 drops all year in 2022. Again, on 92 targets, that's just incredible numbers. Extremely good ball skills, very good hands. And getting to the point of you saying the polishedness and kind of showing the complete wide receiver play that he has. I mean, he works at all 3 levels. You take a look back at 2022, 9 catches, 20-plus yards down the field in air yards. So he's attacking that deeper third. Another 14 coming 10-plus yards down the field. And then, again, a lot underneath it and working after the catch. He's a wide receiver that can attack all 3 phases, which is, again, something you absolutely love. And what I'm most excited for, again, Juice Wells, we just went over why we think he's a stud. I think most Ole Miss fans, most SEC fans know Juice Wells. I mean, I think there was a time during the offseason where I said he was the best SEC wide receiver coming into the year. And again, obviously you had some guys like Malik Neighbors who were dudes, but a healthy Juice Wells is a difference maker on the offensive side of the football. I don't know how opposing defenses are going to approach Ole Miss. I mean, you want to put safeties over the top of both Juice Wells and Trey Harris. And if you don't, that's a mismatch. And if you're leaving 2 safeties high, I mean, Quinshaw Judkins is just going to get going in the run game. And again, if you're leaving 2 safeties high, Jordan Watkins work in the middle of the field or Jordan Watkins underneath, so many different ways this Ole Miss team is going to be able to hurt you. I can't wait to see what opposing defenses try to do when you're working against in all SEC.
They really do have a complete set of like guys who can do all sorts of different things. And you just don't have those holes because at times when Trey Harris wasn't playing last year, you didn't really have that true number 1 guy. And Watkins and Wade played good football for sure, but when you don't have that guy, it does make a difference. Now you got 2 of them. I think it does allow Watkins to have play a role that he's designed to play, which is not playing that number 1.
100% agree with that. And it was nice to see Jordan Watkins kind of emerge as a wide receiver 1 at times, but now you shift him kind of into that slot and you got Juice Wells and Trey Harris on the boundary. That's a better fit for Jordan Watkins, right? And that's not me knocking Jordan Watkins, saying he's not a true wide receiver 1. It's more just respecting the fact that his skill sets are best kind of working on that slot, kind of creating separation and those short and intermediate route trees. And then Trey Harris and Anton Wells absolutely cooking on the outside. You take a look at what Ole Miss has done, and Ole Miss fans, we've gone over this, but the sheer amount of not only quantity of players, but the quality of players is absolutely incredible. Like we've seen programs go to the transfer portal and grab 25, 30 plus players. We've seen Lane Kiffin do that. This year feels different because you look at the quality of players they're coming in. These guys are all studs at their former schools, right? Tyler Barron and Prince Liu, arguably 2 of the best edge rushers in the SEC. You get Juice Wells, arguably one of the best wide receivers in the SEC. You scroll down, Key Lawrence is going to be just kind of a do-it-all guy in the back end. You get a guy like Chris Paul Jr., who was one of the better linebackers in the conference last year. Yes, they're bringing in a lot of players, but what's different from years past for this Ole Miss team is the quality of players they're bringing in, especially within the SEC. Guys like Prince Liu and Tyler Barron and Chris Paul. These guys were some of the best players at their positions in that Southeastern Conference.
And one other thing to note what they're doing in the portal is they have a much better nucleus of talent that's now been in the program for a couple of years than I think they have in the past. I mean, you're starting to see they have a pretty deep defensive line. They're bringing in some of that high-end talent that they maybe were missing, but guys like Pegas who are very good player, Ivy, like they had a good group of guys who can play. It's not like they're remaking this whole team. They're doing it feels a bit more like supplementing rather than remaking it. Yes, they're bringing in some alpha dogs for sure, but they had a really good deep roster of guys. To me, that's a better recipe than maybe what they've done in the past where it was like full remakes.
And that's what's changed, right? Because 2-3 years ago, you didn't really have that nucleus of players. It kept feeling like a revolving door for this Ole Miss program. Like guys coming in, a lot of guys coming out, a lot of guys coming in, a lot of guys coming out. A lot of their key playmakers. I mean, yes, Ole Miss has done a phenomenal job getting players in this offseason. You look across the country, most programs are trying to play roster defense, keeping their best players out of the NFL draft or keeping them out of the transfer portal. Ole Miss's best players are not hitting the transfer portal, and a lot of them are choosing to come back in 2024. And I think we talked about it because they feel like it could be a special season next year. Like they
feel like that because like guys obviously on the outside feel like that. You're seeing guys like Trey Harris, who's a draft pick, say, "I'm good. I'll spend another year at Ole Miss." It does feel like they know what's going on. They know that this team's really, really good and they're really, really close. And yeah, you want to come in, get your one shot at a title. Like this is a team that'll give it to you.
And I think the coaching staff realizes it too. Like the checkbook's coming out. You know what I mean? We are investing in this 2024 season to do something special, and they're executing it at an extremely high level. It's one thing to say, yeah, we're going to try to make this happen, and it's another thing to do it. And bringing in a guy like Princely, bringing in a guy like Tyler Barron, Juice Wells, they're executing it and getting these guys. Now, the last couple targets that we got to talk about, obviously, Walter Nolan on campus this weekend. Not sure when this one wraps up. It seems like Ole Miss is the team to beat in this one. And this would just be the cherry on top. Like, I think this team without Walter Nolan is a team that can win the SEC and, quite frankly, be a massive threat in the college football playoffs. You add a guy like Walter Nolan, and I'm not trying to overreact here for one player. This dude, and Ole Miss fans know it. They've seen him play. Difference maker on the defensive side of the ball. You add Walter Nolan, and I'm printing the shirts, dude. Ole Miss, this is going to be a special season in 2024.
I mean, there's been a reason he's basically been 1-1 both at the high school level and the adventure level. He was dominant in high school, really good trades, dominated at the college level, has kind of those traits have translated. So yeah, you're right. Like this guy's just he helps any team so much because when you have a game record in the middle,
And I think what excites me most is like don't get me wrong, he was awesome for Texas A&M last year. Like he's only going into year 3. Like that's when you normally see the jump for those defensive linemen who are high recruits coming out of high school. Year 3, you're a grown man now. You're going to impact the game. Last guy I want to quickly buzz by before we get off here, and we've talked so much Ole Miss in the transfer portal. Dante Dowdell, one of my favorite running backs coming out of that 2023 class from Mississippi, hits the transfer portal at Oregon. This is a dude that ran for almost 6,000 rushing yards as a high schooler. And you look at Judkins, he's the guy. There's no argument about that. But the real value of Ulysses Bentley, not only was he a phenomenal running back for Ole Miss, he kept Judkins fresh. Like you had a running back to kind of spell a guy like Judkins. And when you're dealing with the fresh Judkins in the fourth quarter, when those linebackers, those defensive linemen are not fresh, that is when Quinshon Judkins took over games. You bring in a guy like Dante Dowdell to kind of supplement and rotate and spell a guy like Judkins. Again, another guy that wouldn't necessarily come in and be a RB1 for Ole Miss, but would play a massive role in this Ole Miss offense, no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, and you need to have probably 2 to 3 running backs at this point.
Especially when you're running like Ole Miss. Like we're running fast, we're running a lot of plays. You got to keep those running backs fresh.
And to be able to go drive to drive and not miss a beat or not miss much of a beat. I mean, you're right. Judkins is still always going to be the guy, but like to be able to cycle a guy in when you're running the way they're running, it's huge. So you do need that depth, and you need a guy who's proven, because you don't want to have a guy who's going to take a big step down from Judkins when he's got to take a break.
Boys are fired up. This is when I keep opening Twitter.
This team looks like it's just gonna be unbelievable. Like they're doing like this is like something I guess you've never been able to see because the portal is never really around. But this might become the blueprint when you start like get that nucleus of guys and they're ready to like go make a move. And okay, this is our year. We're gonna attack it, put everything and push our chips in the middle and like let's do it.
That's what you're seeing. Lane Kiffin, 4th and 3, game on the line. Pushing the chips into the middle of the table for the 2024 season. Absolutely fired up for this program. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the updates, enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Hey, hopefully some more news coming later. Peace, y'all.